And welcome. I have got the lovely Tracey Duncan with me this morning. Hi, Tracey.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
Tracey, I met a few years ago and I just love her ethos. So, Tracey very much shares my opinion on horses, which is that there isn't one thing that's right for everything. It's whatever's right for the horses. But in order to know that, you have to have learned about lots and lots of different things to know all the available options. And Tracey's very much the epitome of that. So, Tracey is a horsewoman and an eventer and an instructor, and she's also an online teacher as well. She's got courses online with us as well. So Tracey, tell us a little bit about yourself and what is your ethos? What is it all about for you?
Um, so for me, ultimately, it's about the horse coming first and working with them in a way that makes sense to them, that they understand, not always following a simple system that one size fits all. You're always going to meet one horse that throws that rule book out the door, and you have to look outside the box and go, hang on a minute, I need to approach this from a different angle, a different approach, different way. What do they need? And for me, it all kind of started because I was looking for a second event horse after my older girl kind of started to slow down and needed to retire. And I bought a little horse. He was fab, all was going well, and then I had a really quite horrific accident on him. At the time, I hadn't known what had caused him to have such a violent reaction. And hindsight's a wonderful thing, isn't it? And then I was in quite a bad state, which my kind of recovery, I'd got to where I could get back on him, but I really didn't trust him. I felt like I wasn't fair on him because he'd flinch and I would flinch. And I thought, this is not a healthy relationship for either of us. I can't be the best version of me for him. Someone else is going to ride him without the history, and he's going to have a nicer time. And it just wasn't doing us any favors. But my challenge was, my injuries were quite horrific, and I thought, who is going to buy him when they see the state of me? So I managed to find a dealer that was happy to take him on, and I disclosed everything. I'd kind of said everything had happened, and I was riding him again. It just wasn't fun for either of us. And me being me, I am often drawn to like the kind of hot-headed, flighty horses. And I looked on his yard, and he was happy to do a part exchange. And there was this mare in the back of her box, and she looked kind of wired and eyes on stalks. And I said, "Oh, can I see her loose jump?" And they were like, "Yeah, fine." And they spun her around their round pen where they loose jumped them. She was jumping the moon. And I thought, fab, she's got a cracking jump on her. And I was like, "Oh, can I see her ridden?" And the groom was like, "Oh, I'm not riding her. She's not been ridden for 3 days." And again, very much I was in my eventer mentality back then. And I thought, just get on her. What's wrong with you? And anyway, the poor lad's boss made this groom get on. And the groom was like white as a sheet. And he kind of rode her for 5 minutes and got off very quickly. And then was like, "Do you want to ride her?" And I was like, "Yep, cool." And she was really, really hot-headed, but I quite liked that. The dealer did disclose that she had been returned 5 times within the space of a month, that he had sort of sold her and then she'd come back. And he gave me a few sort of legit reasons of like, "Oh, yes, well, actually someone else wanted her to be in the 6-year-old classes, and actually the dentist told her that she was 7." And so I kind of was like, "Oh, okay," and thought, whatever. And anyway, even getting her home, it was quite obvious. Like in the trailer, it was one of those journeys that I just was like, I just want to get her home and make sure she's still alive when we get her out at the other end. You could just hear her scrambling and panicking. And really quickly, when I got her home, it was really apparent as to why she'd been returned very, very quickly, and probably why the groom didn't want to ride her as well. She used to do like the wall of death around her stable at the speed of Formula One cars. She would literally canter round the banks of her stable. You'd been trying to muck out around her, and she just, the red mist descended, and she wasn't even like there was no malice in it. She just couldn't think. She was like, another horse has been turned out and I've not been turned out. And leading her to the field, if a pheasant came out the bush, there was just no spatial awareness. She'd knock into you. And then riding wise, she'd go past the mountain block at the speed of light, and I'd literally like throw myself on board as she went past. But the thing that kind of led me to sort of thinking outside the box with her was she really, really violently reared, and I'd already had a really horrific accident. I didn't need a second one. She was meant to be a part share with my sister, and I was like worried that if my sister came just to hack her, she was not by no means a safe hack. And so she's what kind of made me look outside the box, because you know she was dangerous. I had other people to go and just shoot her. You can't sell her on. And I was like, no, I've just got to find a way to understand it. I knew it wasn't malice, and the vet didn't think it was pain. So she's what made me look outside the box to go, I need to change how I'm training. I need to find something for me to be better for her. And I ended up going to see a guy that's kind of like a horseman. I think he kind of puts himself under that bracket. And what he gave me was sort of tools I started to spot what happens before the rears. So I was able to sort of micromanage her, and I could spot what happens before what happens, and I would be able to interrupt her and keep all 4 feet on the floor, which was much more pleasant. But she was still a really hot, tight horse. Like, I hadn't really got to the mind. I was controlling the feet, but I hadn't got to the mind. But that started to kind of put me on this journey where I was starting to look outside the box a bit more and going, okay, there is some stuff that I can do that's a bit different to how I have been training. But it wasn't until I went to work for a lady that she wanted me to start her sports horses, that she'd had some really nice breeding that she'd done and wanted to start them and sell them on. And when I went to work for her, she was producing her own line of dressage horses, and she'd just started some groundwork. She just kind of started the introductions of Pirelli, and I looked at it and I was like, you can keep wiggling your ropes and I'll just carry on doing what I'm doing with my guys. And I really wasn't sold by it at all. But anyway, she took me along for my birthday, and I always smile because she bought me tickets for my birthday to the celebration, and I was really like, okay, yep, I'll go. I remember thinking, I'm really not bought into this. But I ended up going along, and I was actually blown away when I saw it done at a really high level, and what they were demonstrating. I really realized that actually, if I could have a relationship like that with Wu, I wouldn't be having all the trouble we were having, because she was still really hot and tight and tense about life. I was just able to control her feet a bit more and not have so many airs above the ground, but I hadn't got to her mind. I was just managing the feet. So that massively was a game changer for me, that I went, there's this whole other world out there that I don't know enough about. So I came back and threw myself into it, and within about 6 months I started to have a really, really different horse, a much happier horse, a calmer horse, a horse that could think, learn. I was able to read her better, communicate with her better, and she's now the horse that has sort of toured the UK with me doing demos, and actually got back out competing, because she was terrified of competing. She was very nervous and would shake in the ring, to a horse that absolutely loves her job, loves life, really reliable, my rock steady horse that I can just rely upon. She's now 20, so she's sort of leading a slower life, but she was the sort of catalyst for me sort of making a change to go, I need to open my eyes to looking outside the box a bit more and learning a bit more about communicating with them differently.
Wow, that's amazing. There's always that one horse or that one person that's like a catalyst, that's like really pivotal in life, isn't it? And I love hearing the stories about that one horse that just would go, nope, not until you've learned what you need to learn. No, not until you've learned. And they're not consciously doing that, obviously, are they? But they definitely come into our lives so that we learn the next thing. Now, you mentioned something there which we're all a little bit like, oh, I don't know. You said the P word.
Like a swear word.
Now, something that I did want to talk to you about actually is the fact that you don't mention that you learned Pirelli and that you're a Pirelli instructor, because it's got a stigma around it, as have lots of things in the horsing world. Now, I share the same ethos of you, which is it actually doesn't. You don't have to follow something to the letter. Like, you can take something and work out what works for you. And there's bad and good elements of lots of ways of training. Yeah. So tell me about kind of, let's have the discussion about why you don't mention the Pirelli word to anyone, even though look at what it did for your horse. What's that all about?
So for me, so with Woo, I had an instructor come and help me, like an incredible Pirelli instructor. She's down from the southwest. She came up and she wasn't kind of, a lot of people were kind of frightened by Woo's behaviour, and she kind of recognised that I was kind of happy to kind of get on with it. So she was like very supportive, and she really supported me. And she went, "You need to be an instructor." She's like, "How you've managed this mare, how you've turned her around, you need to go and be an instructor." So she was actually what kind of put me on the road to going, okay, just it hadn't crossed my mind. Again, you kind of need someone to sometimes show that they believe in you before you kind of go, oh yeah, I can believe in myself. So she pushed me to go down that road. So I went down that road, and I spent the best part of nearly 5 to 6 months out in the States doing courses. I got up to where I had my third star, and I really rate it for what it taught me about horses, reading horses, what it taught me about myself, how how we are affects them massively. And then I kind of got to a point in my horsemanship where I wanted to kind of, I guess, go back to my roots a bit more. And again, it's that self-belief and just trusting enough what you know. So it gave me a really good foundation for me then to go and flourish. And I've spent the last few years kind of pulling from all directions of other people that I really am inspired by, really rate their horsemanship or just the way they are with their horses. And Pat really strongly believes in, like, he wants his program to be really pure and wants his instructors to purely teach what he believes, which you can understand from a kind of system point of view if he doesn't want it to kind of start to get muddled up with what other people are doing. And so I made the decision to come away from it a couple of years ago so that I could just be me. Because there's definitely bits, a bit like everything, there's bits that you really like from something, and there's bits that you're not going to like so much. And for me, as I kind of grew as my own sort of self with horses, I found that I was more and more just being me and kind of making it my own. So I felt that I needed to just go solo and not renew my license with them. But I am very thankful for what they gave me, and I wouldn't be where I am today if I hadn't have gone down that road. So I'm thankful for my time that I had with them and what I've been able to take from it, and then allow that to blossom in my own way.
And that's so true, yeah. Isn't it? Of a lot of learning is, when we create, so I've got a system, for instance, that I've created over the years,
yeah,
that includes all of the modules and all of the elements that you need to understand a rider's mindset. And I'm starting to train people in that. So I have my own coaches.
Yeah.
So people will go into that. And I was very much like this as well, like you were with Pirelli. You've got to learn the system, which means you kind of have to do it to the letter to begin with, to learn it.
Yeah.
But once you've learned something, it doesn't matter then. Like, that's part of you. That's a part of you now, but it doesn't make it you.
Yeah.
You aren't that thing. You are someone who's learnt about it. And it's so true as anything in the equestrian world, isn't it? That, you can learn something, you can learn a system, you can learn a way of doing it, but it doesn't mean that's the only way.
Yeah.
And so tell us a little bit about...
always evolving.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what you'd say your way is now then, that you've been through that journey and things.
So you hear a lot about kind of positive, negative reinforcement. And I think for me, like, it can be a bit of a taboo word, but ultimately kind of negative reinforcement doesn't necessarily mean, and I know Jenny's had on quite a few of her podcasts had this actually explained correctly, so I won't go into it in depth, but negative doesn't mean punishment. But for me, it does make sense to the horse in the way that they understand. And I want to help the horse learn to be a puzzle solver, because if they can solve puzzles, they become better learners. And ultimately, I want a confident learner. So quite often in my line of work, I either get like rehab cases, and in rehab cases, you get behavioural cases because they've been in pain, and then it can take them a while to realise it's not going to hurt. And because it has hurt, they've become really unconfident learners, because they go, I can't try because it's going to hurt. I can't try anything because it's just going to hurt. I can't do it. So as learners, they just go into flight or fight mode rather than, for me, ultimately, and I've had it like where I had my homebred. As a learner, he was phenomenal because he'd never had a negative experience. He'd never been put in a situation where he had felt overwhelmed, where he'd had to go into fight or flight mode. And he was so easy to teach stuff to. And it wasn't because I just used positive reinforcement with him. He'd had what I would class as negative reinforcement, but done with fairness and with good timing and feel. It helped him become a really good learner and puzzle solver. And for me, puzzle solving is their ability to think through a situation rather than they're a prey animal. They are programmed to respond and act on adrenaline. And that's the beauty of the fact that a lot of us want to then go and jump around a cross country course. We get to walk the cross country course. We know what's coming. We get a little bit of going, well, I can prepare the canter because I know I've got a ditch coming up. So I want to make sure they're not flat out so they get to see it before they jump it. We get the opportunity to have that, we can see ahead when we're going across country. They can't. They are acting purely on instinct of like, bloody hell, there's a head. I need to get my feet up and out of the way. And that's the beauty of the fact that we then get to compete them and enjoy them doing actually something that what is really natural for them, but actually in their flight mode. So for me, I want to go, well, can I have a horse that can be actually learn to think? Because equally, the downside of the flight mode is the fact that if a pheasant comes out the hedge, they are programmed to bolt and think later. But for me, if I can get them to go, hang on a minute, think about it, rather than bolt, for me, it's ultimately getting to where they can have a partnership with us, where they ask questions. So even when they're unsure and they're worried by something, that I can build a partnership with them where they ask me questions rather than just reacting and thinking later. I want to have my horse having a conversation with me where they get to where they trust, but also can think through and problem solve to the point that when they're on their own, they can problem solve a bit more. We've all had that sort of scenario where horses have got caught up in electric fencing, and ultimately for me, I know that if I've done enough prep on the ground, I can help my horse not panic in those situations rather than them going, I'm caught up, I'm tangled, that's it, I'm just gonna, and they absolutely savage themselves because they panic, rather than actually going, hang on a minute, I'm in a bind. Maybe if I stop and think my way through it, the bind softens, they can get themselves out of trouble. And for me, that applies on the ground and ridden. Of can I kind of work with them in a way where it's a two-way language, it's a conversation. Relaxation is really high up for me in my kind of priorities. Biomechanics, healthy biomechanics, I think makes a massive difference to their emotional state. If you think about from a flight point of view, if you are the unbalanced one cantering in a herd, you're the one that's going to trip and fall over, which for them is really worrying, being a prey animal. So I often see a relationship between an emotional state and actually what state their body's in. And sometimes that's just their conformation has taught them to be a bit upside down and unbalanced, but they get really tight and worried about it. And when you show them that actually, if you relax, soften over your back, use yourself, they go, oh my God, that feels better. So I think there's a real relationship also between the body and the mind. And it's just coming from all angles of going, how can you have the happiest of horse? And like Jenny mentioned at the beginning, for me, it's certainly not one size fits all. I have a variation of, I have a shod horse, I have a barefoot horses, I have ones that prefer to be ridden bitless, I have ones that prefer to be bitted. I don't like to put myself in any camp and get righteous about anything, because I just think you've got to listen to the horse and their feedback and work with them in a way that suits them. And some horses need you to go slow in life. Some, if you go slow, you're going to bore them and they're going to take over because you're too boring. So you kind of have to be more provocative and fun for those guys. And it's learning in us to adapt to what does that horse need. All of mine are so different, and the way I work with one will be completely different to how I work with the other, and that's the beauty, is you just never stop learning. I love that they keep kind of teaching every single day. They teach you something, and every single horse I meet teaches me something. So I really enjoy that side of horses.
Cool. Oh, that's just so nice, isn't it, to hear that you can, and it's the same with humans, you can get them to understand themselves, you can get them to understand learning, you can get them to trust themselves, you can get them to react differently in a situation, so that if that situation arises, they are able to cope with it. And it's the same as the human brain programming and the things I do, in that, you know, it's not that bad things aren't going to happen. Sorry, guys, they are. It's having the resources to pause, to think about it, to be logical, which they don't really have a logical element to their brain. They just don't have that prefrontal cortex. So it actually doesn't exist in that respect. But that you can stop them reacting out of panic. And that's how we want our horses to be, isn't it? We don't want panicky flight animals. They're not fun to sit on a ride. And I love the fact that you talk about as well, if we look at kind of the fixed mindset versus growth in humans, what I've just heard you talk about there is the growth mindset from a horse, which is I can learn and it's not going to hurt. You know, I'm not going to see new situations or potential learning as scary or painful or horrible and therefore avoid them, because, you know, we love the curiosity in our horses. And like you say, when you go cross country, you want them to be thinking and working stuff out, don't you? So tell us a little bit then about, because you event as well, tell us a little bit about how this has really helped you as an eventer, because I think there is a misconception out there that as soon as you hear horseman, horsewoman, whatever that kind of stuff is, that it is that you just spend your whole time waving around ropes and sticks on the ground, and you might ride a little bit, but it'll be on a long ploppy rein, and you're never, and you might play about with some barrels or something, you know. That's such a misconception, isn't it? Yeah, that's the one. And I think a lot of that comes from people seeing the stuff, and that's all they see. But what I love about you and why I wanted you on here is because you know, you're a serious rider as well, and you bring this stuff in to really help with that. So you are like, you jump stuff that's big enough to jump, you know. Like, so what do you do, and how did you bring it into your event?
So don't get me wrong, guys. I actually love nothing more than like sometimes wanging around without a bridle on. And like, you don't, for me, it doesn't have to all be, it's like, doesn't have to all be about that when you say horsemanship. But for me, I think there's a real feel of freedom of knowing I have enough of a connection that I can go up the South Downs and whip my bridle off and go for a gallop up the Downs. Like, I feel ultimate freedom and the ultimate trust. So that, for me, I do enjoy that side of it. But equally, it's not all about that for me. I often get asked the question of how does this transition from the ground into the ridden, and how can it help your kind of competition rider? Because I think a lot of, again, there's often a sort of understanding of like, well, yeah, it's just kind of people that back, you know, mucking around in their backyard that do it, not your professionals. And the beauty of it is actually I am helping more and more professionals. I've got a top show jumper who I take my hat off to her, because I can feel the shift she's made in her, and she can see the biggest shift in her horses. And often, actually, when I'm working with professionals, I don't always have to get them off onto the ground. You can start with this on board. It doesn't have to always start on the ground. When professionals have really good feel and timing already, they haven't got there for, you know, without that good feel and timing, they haven't schooled to that level of dressage or jumping. So it doesn't always have to be that you have to get off. It's just sometimes it can really help the horse to learn something on the ground and actually empower the horse to have some self-confidence on the ground. So from that side of things, your groundwork, actually, there's a lot more. The horse needs to have a lot more self-confidence actually to do something on the ground without us being sat on board. When we're sat on board, we offer them a lot more physical connection, and that physical connection can often give horses a lot of confidence. And I'll often hear people say, oh, my horse is so much better actually when I'm sat on them. And I'll be like, yeah, because you're physically holding their hand more. You've physically got a seat connection, a leg connection, and a rein connection. And some horses really like that kind of babysit feeling. And also sometimes they'll sort of do it and feel the fear anyway. They'll get on with it because you're able to micromanage them through it a lot more than actually when you're on the ground and you've got a rope between you. It's actually much harder to babysit them. That distance, I always liken it to like an elastic band, and the closer we are, the sort of tighter your elastic band is and the sort of snappier it is, and then as you stretch it, that gets weaker, and so the communication gets weaker and it's more likely to snap, which is then when, you know, your horse gets emotional and can't handle it. So for me, the groundwork's about empowering the horse, empowering them to be able to actually solve it themselves, build some self-confidence, and like I was talking about earlier, that ability for them to puzzle solve and think through something. For like one of mine in particular I'm working with at the moment, she's a rehab that I took on. She is really quite challenging, which I love because she's already taught me loads, and I do love a project. But for her right now, I'm actually trying to get her okay with the water treadmill because it'll be really good physically for her. But she is probably one of the most squeeziest horses I've had with regards to anything where she feels squeezed in. So whether that is above, below, left, right, forward, backward, she finds anything really hard, down to a stable door is hard for her. And when I first got her, I noticed when I went to view her, she always trotted through a stable door. And I thought, that's not okay that she has been stabled for like a year and she still doesn't understand a stable door doesn't mean pressure. So we've worked I've worked really hard. Her loading is so much better, the stable door is much better, but getting her with the treadmill to not want to leap off the end of the treadmill, I've had to get to where she can think. The treadmill's too narrow for me to safely go, I'll walk you down, because if she does panic, she's going to knock me over because it's narrow. So I actually need to go, you need to get to where you're calm enough to think your way down and through it. Now, actually, for her, I'm starting to see all the work I'm doing on the ground is starting to pay off ridden. And there's a lot more, actually, I'd say there's a lot more for me to undo ridden, because actually her history of pain is under saddle. So, you know, I expect actually the transition that she's made on the ground has taken me 5 months to get to where we are. And actually I expect under saddle it will take me longer. But I can already start to see the groundwork I'm doing is starting to pay off with the bits of riding I'm doing. Like I get more of a subtle I'm struggling when she's under saddle versus her violent reaction is pretty spectacular. And I you know, it's not fun. I don't have that ego of I want to be the one sat on this big rearing horse, you know, that you kind of do when you're sort of in your 20s and you think, yeah, look at me riding this horse through. Because actually for me now, I feel like I failed them. If she gets to that point, I feel like I failed her, because I know it's not feeling good for her. So I'm already starting to see the groundwork's paying off, that she gives me this little warning of I'm not okay, rather than the full explosion. And then I were able to kind of go, okay, let's try and have a conversation and work our way through this without it. So I hope that she'll become a competition horse. I hope we can kind of slowly get past the sort of the pain memory for her, and the patterns of her going, I'm not okay, and her go-to patterns, and starting to change her habits for her. So I hope that I'm able to get her to where she'll be happy competing. And again, for like my other horses, for me, it's about when I go to a competition, can they still be a partner? Can they be relaxed and blowing out in the warm-up arena? I often think for me, the warm-up arena is, I don't hear enough blowing out. I want to hear more horses kind of going, letting go and relaxing, because a relaxed horse is always going to produce a much better test. Jump better, because if they're tight, that's when they're going to leave a hind leg because they're tense in their back. So it's about, for me, of going, how can we enhance how the horse feels about it. For me, I want my horse to go home feeling like a winner every time. It doesn't matter where you came on the scoreboard, what rosette you got. If my horse goes home feeling like they've won, I feel like, I feel like they've won. And I feel like, you know, I expect actually the I've done the best I can possibly do for them. Horses have no concept of where they've come, but you can make them feel like a winner by just being really pleased with how much they've tried, perhaps, that day for you. So for me, it's about going, can my horse go out and have a really nice day? And can I set them up that the questions I've asked them today, I've not overwhelmed them with? So can I prepare them through kind of the systems and approaches that I use, that I prepare them so that when I go out and ask them a question in competition, they're able to say yes, and they've not got overwhelmed or found that was way too much. Now, with competition, you cannot prepare them for every single cross-country fence they're going to meet. You cannot prepare for every venue you're going to go and do dressage in. What you can prepare them for is having a relationship where, when they're not sure, that they can look to you and you go, yeah, you're okay. And then they go, all right, mum's put me in a situation that actually I know she'd never put me in a situation that I can't handle, that I'm overwhelmed by. I might be a bit worried, but they've reassured me. And then they go, it's okay, I can try. And that can be even just strategies in the warm-up arena of, can I teach a sort of a pattern at home, ridden, that I just use as a warm-up, and my horse just knows, oh yeah, this is our warm-up where I get to stretch long and low and I get really soft. And if they recognize that at home, being able to take that to a competition and using it, if they get there and they're a bit tight and overwhelmed, giving them something that they recognize at home, something they're familiar with, that they can get to the competition and go, I know this. I don't recognize anything else around me, but I know what mum's given me. I can focus on this and find a bit of relaxation and confidence. And the same with kind of meeting a funny shaped fence. I mean, I think back to when I first started eventing, it was mostly logs, and you get an odd flower bed and maybe a log over a ditch, and your steps, and it was far less technical. But also, I remember as Addie got older and went up the levels, and I remember thinking, you're having to jump a log that was now carved into a squirrel or a crocodile going into the water, and there's far more, they're way more imaginative nowadays. And Wu in particular, when I first got her sort of pre-doing any sort of groundwork with her, and I tried to compete her, I don't really, looking back, I don't know why, I must have, again, it was just I didn't know what I didn't know, but it really blew her brains. So she was like, I've just jumped a tire fence, now I'm coming to a brush fence, and now I'm coming to a log that's the shape of a hedgehog. That absolutely blew her brains. And she would just go, no, I need to stop and look at it. It's changed. I don't get why it's changed. And I actually took her out of competition for a couple of years while I really felt like I got a good foundation on her. And then after that, I was able to go, well, I can't prepare her that whatever random fence might come up on a cross-country course. But what I can do is get my relationship to the point that even when she goes, that looks different, that I can put my leg on and go, yeah, but you're okay. And her trust that I would make a decision that is the best for both of us, and her not need to take over and go, no, I need to stop and look at it first. Because effectively that's them taking over, when they kind of go, nope, I need to stop and look and make sure this is all right for myself, rather than her trusting my idea was actually a safe idea. So ultimately for me, it's about preparing them that when I take them out to competition, that they can have as confident and positive time as possible, and no matter the result, they come home feeling like a winner at the end of the day. So that's for me, that's bridging awesome. The gap.
Yeah, bridging that gap. I love that. And you've mentioned so many things there that I need to listen to that back again to go, oh, that makes sense. Oh, that's that then. Yeah, okay. Especially with my boy. Always thinking, I'm always, whenever I'm listening to experts, thinking about my horse and how it works with him and things as well. And so, you did mention kind of ego for you there, and kind of a bit about your mindset and things as well. To have done what you've done and to be doing it, slightly differently. It's not the norm. It's your way now, which is great and amazing. And I love it when people come up with their own way. What have you had to kind of go through and get through? And also you must have had some accidents. You said you've had some accidents along the way and you're still going. Yeah. What have you had to do or think or be to kind of get to where you are today? What are the things you've had to overcome from your perspective, not just the horses?
So as I mentioned earlier, I did have a really a really horrific accident, which was one of those accidents where I'm lucky to be alive. Like this scar on my forehead, if that had been like a millimeter deeper, I would not be here. And that was my hat that saved my life, and that was a hoof that went through my hat, like crushed my hat and crushed my hat into my skull. So, and that was on the horse that I'd kind of, and that's why I was like, who's going to buy him when they see what he's done to me? So interestingly, back then I was young enough and I still had the eventer mindset of, you just blooming well get back on. Like, as soon as I said to the doctors, I was like, well, how long till I can get a hat on my head? And oh no, actually I didn't use that. I was clever, actually. I didn't use the hat on my head. I think I said, how long until I can be up and about? And they were like, 3 weeks. So 3 weeks to me went hat on the head. And mentally looking back, I really pushed myself through a ton of thresholds of, I was like, I've got to get back on him. I've got to get back on him. Because back then I was like, I want to be an eventer, and that's what you do. I've got to get back on him. And so I did, but it was, like I said to you earlier, it was not fun. It was not pleasant. Every little spook, I was definitely like, oi, stop it, get up, kind of thing. And it wasn't fun or pleasant for either of us. And that was for me, that was quite a hard decision to have to. Back then, at that kind of age, I was 23. I would still say my ego really struggled with feeling that I'd let a horse kind of conquer me. And I really had to kind of let go of that. And I made the decision based on, actually, for him, I really recognized I wasn't the right person for him. But then, of course, I still went and bought like Woo, and everyone else had told me, just go and swap him for a quiet cob. You just need something that's going to get your confidence back. And interestingly, I actually think I did make the right decision getting Woo, because I think if I'd got myself the quiet plod that everyone was telling me I should go and get, I think I then wouldn't have believed in myself again. Woo, as I mentioned earlier, took me on this whole other journey, and I think everyone associated it. I think everyone went, "Oh, she's gone to Pearly because she nearly died." But actually, if I hadn't have had Woo, I don't think I'd have ever believed in myself again as being a rider. I'd have gone, well, I can only ride because I'm on my quiet plod. Whereas actually, she gave me self-belief again. And when she blew up, I didn't have the history of, she's put me in hospital. I was like, she's just blowing up. So for me, that was quite a shift initially. And then I don't know if it is just something, because you kind of get older and mature, but again, kind of my mentors and influences that I've had kind of come in my life that have shaped my journey have really kind of allowed me to learn about being present and letting go of the ego. And ultimately for horses, I really realized that like I said, I feel like I've failed them. When I'm starting a horse, if they go to bronking, I feel like I've failed them, because I know, and I trust my system, that you can set a horse up that if there's nothing physically wrong with them, they can have a smooth transition from going from the field to being a ridden horse without having to go through that bronking stage. And when you hear that horrible noise when they first feel the girth, they shouldn't have to feel that. They shouldn't have to feel that fear. If you take your time and you go slow and you set them up and introduce it gradually with, like introducing a bareback pad, just having a rope around their belly, there's loads you can do to set them up. And I think, again, there was a time, like I remember when I was in the riding school, when I was like, you wouldn't be allowed to do this these days, but at like 11, 12 years old, I was the one sitting on all of the like newly started ones, and I thought it was brilliant riding around a bronc. I thought it was fun, and I thought it made me look really cool. And I'm like, I'm almost ashamed to say that, but it's true. And you can't, I was 12 years old, doesn't matter. But now for me, I don't look at some rider that's sitting out a rodeo or a rearing show at a competition and be like, oh wow, you're amazing. I just look and go, I see a distressed horse that's trying to tell the rider something. And that's not to say that's not me kind of judging, because they might be working through a rehab, they might be working through something going on, and that's absolutely fine. But I look across and I think that horse is emotionally troubled right now. And you can certainly look at the rider and see how they're approaching it, as to kind of, is the ego of the rider involved. But I've ultimately learned, I feel like we really can't judge one another of, who are we to judge somebody else? And it's just about being present. And I've never met a horse person that doesn't want the best for their horse, but we might have complete opposite ideas. But it's just where they are on their journey, where I am on my journey, and it doesn't make right or wrong. Yes, of course, there's stuff that on the internet that you're going to wince at and not agree with, but you can look at what you don't agree with and go, actually, that's just what that person knows right now in their life with their knowledge. It doesn't necessarily make them a horrendous person, it's just where they're at. So for me, there's been a lot of that part with the ego of going, actually, for the horse's sake, you have to let your ego go. Your ego gets in the way, and it will get in the way of your performance, of your horse's development. So for that has really helped. And then, of course, I have had some spectacular falls as well along the way with eventing. Addie and I had a rotational, which really blocked me. It was jumping into water, and she, looking back on what happened, because again, I was like, we had a perfect takeoff spot, it was feeling fab, and then we landed and she flipped one way, unfortunately flew me the other way. And of course, as you do with riders, you kind of want to know why, because when you know why, it makes it easier to kind of, I often think, move forward. I think sometimes the unknown, we get really stuck as like, why did that happen? Which for me actually was part of the case with the horse I had my accident on, was actually my saddle had been checked by a saddler and he hadn't picked up on it being broken. And it wasn't till I had a different saddler come out to fit the saddle to Woo, and they were like, you do realise this saddle's broken? And I was like, well, no wonder the previous horse tried to bury me. And it helped me kind of deal a bit with my accident, knowing why it happened, because at the time I was like, we were just trotting along, 1 minute it was fine, and then next minute he wanted me off his back. So it helped me kind of process and understand that. So I remember kind of watching the video and going, oh, okay, she got distracted. She was, she jumped over the roll top, and then it was like a drop. And I saw her kind of go, rather than focusing on her landing, and when she lifted her head, she lifted one leg, so she ended up completely landing all weight on one leg, which of course then flipped her, because it was quite a substantial drop, flipped her one way and me the other. And then moving on from that, I then really recognized, like, when I was riding to a water fence that I had to jump into, I definitely was having that sort of go but don't go. Like, I want to go clear, but actually I'm not that keen on jumping into water. And so when I had the opportunity to take on Buddy, I was like, I cannot let this affect this horse, because I know the level that we're riding at, I'm going to be, jumping into water. And so I ended up having some NLP coaching to really help me change my mindset of how I felt about water. And it massively helped me, in the sense of, I remember doing it and I felt really pumped after my session with the coach. And I was like, oh yes, can't wait to go cross country schooling and give it a go. And then I was driving to the venue like, has it worked? What if it hasn't worked? What happens if I come to that water fence and it hasn't worked? And then I remember riding to the water and I thought, just put your leg on, ride. And I was like, oh my God, this is so much fun. And then I was like, I want to do it again. And it wasn't that, thank God I've got it over and done with and I'm done. I was like, I want to do it again, and I want to come at it and attack it. And you've got to attack cross country fences, especially as they get bigger. You can't ride in going, yeah, maybe. How about, what do you think? You've got to kind of be committed. And so for me, that made a massive shift. And you're hearing it more and more that all of our top riders have sports coaches and mindset coaches, because while it's not a round of golf, it is massively, there's a lot of mindset that comes into play with our horses and affects our performance massively. So yeah, I think I've had a bit of the horses have influenced my ego, and then there's also kind of been the bits along the way that's massively helped me have to go, I need to work on me right now in order to be better for my horses.
Awesome. Yeah, I knew you'd had a bit of help along the way there from somewhere, because it's really unusual to just overcome something like that by just doing it, because normally, like you say, you actually end up practicing the pattern that you don't want, because the more you do something, the better at it you get. And someone's got to come in and intervene with that, and you know, and that's what it's got to be sometimes. And sometimes it could be from years ago, and you notice it's rearing its head again. You think, where's that come from? But it was just buried away there, ready to pop back up at that inopportune moment, you know. Cool. Okay. So we've covered a lot of stuff, like a lot of stuff. Is there anything that you kind of think you would like to say or cover or sum up with, or anything that you think really just kind of sums up what we've been talking about today for you?
I think the biggest thing is listen to your horses. I'm a great believer in listen to your gut. And you know, I know there's a lot of like people like go, oh, a bit witchy voodoo, and I don't mean it like that, but I mean like we have a real, I believe we all have a real intuition that you have to listen to. And you know, we've all made decisions based on a gut decision. At some point in your life you would have had a gut decision about something, and you don't always necessarily get feedback it was the right thing to do because you listened. But yeah, I am a great believer in listen to your gut, listen to your horse, ask yourself, is it me? Because I think that's where it can be really challenging, is when there's a confidence issue, your gut will be going, don't get on, don't get on, don't get on, and actually someone else can get on your horse and be absolutely fine. And that's when it's like, yes, you go work with Jenny, like you need to work with someone to help your mindset, or have a coach that's able to recognize, and have a relationship with a coach that's able to recognize and say to you, I think now you need to go and work on you, which I will often refer people to go, you need to go work on you about this. Like, it's not about your horse's canter, it's about how you feel about canter or ditches or whatever. So I think it's about working on us as well. But ultimately for me, it's listening to your horse. Don't be afraid to experiment and explore other options, and adapt. Just because it worked with your previous horse doesn't mean it's going to work with this horse. And I think just staying really open. And even if you read something or you listen to someone and it doesn't ring true to you at that moment in time, that's fine. But it's just kind of going, okay, someone sent me this piece of information, have a read. And you might not be ready to take it in or kind of go, that's for me right now. But it's just kind of staying open to learning and trying other things. And I think for me, it's just being present with them. The more present we are with them, I think the better they perform. They are always in the moment. We have so much to learn about them. They're so forgiving, far more forgiving than us humans. And I think, yeah, learn from them, stay present and open. And yeah, I ultimately believe that you know, pretty much anything can be turned around given the right time and training, whether that's training the horse or training the human. So yeah.
Cool. Thank you so much. It's been really, really interesting listening to you, and I love your ethos, always have done. And if people want to get hold of you, how can they get in touch?
I have my website, tracyduncan.co.uk. So you can kind of see what I have available on there, have sort of some different options. And the best thing to do is normally drop me a text or a Facebook message. I'm a bit rubbish with calls because I'm normally riding or training or teaching, etc. So the best thing to do is just drop me a line and say hello, and go from there.
And you have got one course on horseycourses.com at the moment as well, haven't you, which is all about trailer loading, and lots of sort of options around things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Lots of online support. And I have an online little group that I started in lockdown for everybody, and it's carried on because they've all really loved it. But anyone can join at any time. And that has quite it's initially a bit groundwork based, because I thought I better be PC during lockdown and keep it to groundwork versus the riding. But yeah, it has lots of videos and Q&As twice a month where you can basically ask me any questions, and that's nice and cheap and cheerful for £10 a month, but a lot of information for it.
Cool. And how do they find that to join that? Is that through Facebook?
That's Facebook, and again, just drop me a line and then I can basically invite them to it. So
mega. Oh, that sounds amazing. I think I might have a look at that. That sounds fantastic. So, and you are actually based down in West Sussex, is that correct?
Yes, I'm basically on the border of east and west. So yeah, I'm Ditchling, which is near Lewes, for anyone that doesn't know. Ditchling is like a tiny little village. So
cool.
Yeah.
Okay. And you do travel a little bit, but obviously you've got all these other options and things available as well.
Yes, mostly from homes. And if you're local and in a real pickle, like you can't load your horse, then I will obviously come to you.
Cool. Thank you so much, Tracey. Gina said it's very interesting indeed. Thank you very much.
Having me.
And we will catch up soon.
Super.
Bye.
Have fun with your horses, guys.